Hey everyone, this is Dan with Digital Tutors. In this Ask DT, we're going to look at a question from Leviathan about the process for setting up light rays with the participating volume node in Maya 2014. So here in Maya, I've got the project files for the participating volume node lesson from the Mental Ray Nodes Reference Library Lights course. Now, not a lot has actually changed from when that lesson was recorded, but a few things have moved around here in the later version. So let's walk through these steps just to make sure that we have everything working here in Maya 2014. So here, if I were to render this out real quick just to see what we have, we can see that not a lot has been set up. I am rendering with Mental Ray here. We have simple paint effects trees in front of a moon. If we look in the alpha, we can see things a little bit easier here. Go ahead and close out of this just so we can take a look at our scene. If we were to maybe switch to our top view here, we can see we have a sphere. Inside this sphere is a simple point light. And we have our trees as some sort of a surface between the light and our camera. Now, I would like to point out that this sphere here, if we were to open up the render stats, we have cast shadows turned off as well as receive shadows just so that the light inside of it can actually shine through this sphere, just to kind of get this nice little moon effect here. All right, so let's first start by setting up our participating volume node. So the first step of this is actually to create geometry for our volume effects to live in. So I'm going to create something like a simple sphere. Pull this in. Let's scale this up. Now, the key to this, whatever sort of surface that we create, is that we want the light to be inside of this geometry, but we want the camera that we're going to be rendering from to be outside of it. So if we were to scale this up huge and have our camera inside of it, we'd lose that effect. We want to make sure that our camera is on the outside, the light is on the inside. There we go. Let's switch to maybe our front view just to make sure that we're lined up here. All right. Maybe move it up a little bit. There we go. That looks good. Once we have our geometry created, we need to set up the participating volume node. So in order to do this, we actually want to open up our hypershade. Let's come into Window, Rendering Editors, open up our hypershade here. We want to apply this to the shading group of a material. So I'm going to go ahead and create a simple Lambert material. There we go. Something that has a shading group connected to it. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and rename this guy to this will be our party volume Lambert. Just so we know what this is. And let's open up the shading group. Once again, this is going to be our party volume material shading group, once again, so we know what this is. There we go. And we want to apply that to the sphere. So I'll select the sphere, right-click on my node here in the hypershade, apply material to selection. Once we have that in there, we want to apply the actual party volume node. So where we want to apply that is here in the shading group. If we scroll down, we'll find our Mental Ray flag here. And under Custom Shaders, we want that to be our volume shader. So I'll open up the render nodes for the volume shader. Look under our volumetric materials. There is our party volume. Very good. Now, if we were to render this right now, if we open up our render view from before, let's go ahead and save this and render this back out. We can see it's absolutely black. We even don't have an alpha channel anymore. Now, the reason for that is actually very simple. Really, what we're seeing when we render is just this sphere. We don't have any light because the light is inside the sphere and it can't get through this sphere. So let's go back into our hypershade here, select our shading group, and under our material shader, let's pull in, under the legacy materials, our transmat. There we go. Once we have that, that will allow us to see through this sphere here. So if we were to take this and render again. All right, great. Now we can see our tree and our moon again. But if we were to compare this with our original render, it looks exactly the same. And really, we just lost some time in our render time. So what's really happening here? Well, the reason for this is because by default, the party volume node is set to black. So we are getting this volumetric effect, but we really can't see it because it blends in perfectly with our background. So let's come into our hypershade again. Go ahead and open that up. Select our party volume node. And let's adjust this scatter. Maybe bring it up to something a little bit lighter. That's going to adjust the color of our volumetric render. So I'm going to go ahead and re-render this guy here. All right, great. Now we're getting this really cool foggy volumetric effect. So we can see what we had before. And now that we have our participating volume node working, we can see the effect that we have now. But we're not really getting the light to interact with these objects as we would expect. We'd expect to see some light rays coming in from the light being affected by this object in front of our camera. Now, the reason for that is because we need to actually have our light be a mental ray light. And it's because the participating volume node is a mental ray node. To be able to talk to the light, it actually has to be a mental ray light. Right now, all we have is a standard point light. So if we were to come in and select this guy here, make sure we have our point light selected. There we go. All we have is just this simple Maya light. If we come under our mental ray options, I'm going to close these guys here until we get to our custom shader. There we go. Under the light shader, let's pull in a mental ray light. So maybe something like, since this is a point light, let's just pull in another point light. There we go. And now if we come back into our render view, I'm going to save this guy here, re-render, and there we have it. We're getting these really cool light rays that are coming through from the light inside of this sphere into being affected by this geometry. So we can see what we had before and now after. Now it is a little bit grainy, so if we wanted to come into our render settings, we could go into our quality tab and maybe bump this up. The sampling, of course, that's going to increase our render time. So it's definitely something that we're going to want to wait until the end of our render setup to do. But as we can see, the difference here, what we had before, a little more grainy. You can see our render time almost doubled there, increased pretty significantly, but we smoothed out some of that grain. As you can see, the core of the process really hasn't changed much from the older versions of Maya. There are a few slight differences here and there, but that's a look at how we can set up the participating volume node here inside of Maya 2014 while getting some really cool light ray effects.